What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review the PC gaming phenomenon Baldur's Gate 3, which came out last Thursday. I've been playing it like a madman ever since, and I saw a stat over the weekend that this game is just taken off like a goddamn rocket. There were over 800,000 people playing it at the same time, or peak concurrent players, or whatever the phrase is that they use. And the game hasn't even come out on the PS5 yet. It won't even come out on the Xbox until sometime like late into 2024. It's not available on the Mac. It is already a complete and total runaway success. But my predicament or my dilemma was I didn't really know when I was supposed to actually do the review, because I'm used to reviewing movies and shows. You go see the movie, you watch the show, you offer your thoughts. But with a game as vast and complex and intricate as Baldur's Gate 3, I don't know how deep into the game you're supposed to be before you review it. I mean, the early access version, which I reviewed a couple weeks ago, that was easy. I cleared the early access version a couple times, offered my review, I went fucking crazy. But now I checked my stats. I've played this game for 144 hours, and I think about 100 of that was in early access, so also, you have to take into account of the 44 hours I've played in the new game, a lot of that was kind of going over the original terrain that was offered in the early access. So probably about 24 hours in actual like new content that wasn't available earlier this summer. But my party's now level 8 overall, and I've got 16 out of 53 achievements. So I don't know what's the cutoff for reviewing the game, but I feel confident when I say this is my favorite media experience that I've had in any way, shape, or form in calendar year 2023. Like, it beats any show, beats any movie, beats any novel, it beats any UFC pay-per-view event. Like, my media diet consists of a lot of variety, but goddamn, Baldur's Gate 3, I found it just to be enthralling. And some of the best money that I ever spent was buying a PC just to play this game. I played early access on my Mac, and I heard a couple days before the release of the game that it would not be available on the Mac at release. I was like, well, then I guess, like, even if I have to sell some organs, I'm going to go buy a goddamn PC. And holy shit, not only does the game look 1,000 times better on the PC, but I feel like I've been postponing becoming a PC gamer my entire life. I started using Macs in the late 80s, and I just basically got sucked into the Apple world and never looked back. And every once in a while, a game would come along that I would miss as a result of not being a PC gamer. But now I know what everybody's been talking about for all these decades, like consoles are great, but PC games are better. And I know that's horribly snobbish and elitist to say, but it's just a completely, totally different experience. And given the way that I'm obsessively playing this game, once again, I'm 144 hours in total, I'm easily going to hit 1,000 or more, meaning that the money that I spent on the PC is actually relatively inexpensive entertainment per hour invested in the overall platform. And the last time I felt this excited about a game was when Elden Ring came out last year, where you're in that state where everything about your life becomes a total inconvenience, like eating, sleeping, bathing. They're all so annoying. All you want to do is play the game until your eyes start to feel like sandpaper, but goddamn, it is so worth it. Because when it comes to fantasy experiences, when it comes to RPG experiences, it's almost like Larian Studios was like a DJ taking requests, because everything that I want from an RPG experience, specifically a strategy-based RPG, a game that is based on Dungeons and Dragons, it's almost like they went into my brain and took requests for like every single thing that I want to see in a game, from the high level of customization of the characters. I mean, it's a perfect adaptation of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. And I don't even really like 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. I like 1st and 2nd edition. This game will make you a believer in 5th edition, but more importantly than all the gameplay and the strategy and the combat, I mean, the combat is glorious. I'm like physically unwell and unhappy anytime I'm not in combat. All I want to do is just enjoy that 3D chess. But there's an emotionally engaging story here that's hard to put into words, because every single decision that you make changes the story. It's not like they came up with like a story like a novel and you just kind of walk through it beginning to end. It's one of the most malleable and flexible and improvisational stories that I've ever seen, where no matter what choice you make, the acting is incredible, the story is incredible, like all these incredible story beats that like will pay dividends way down the road. And what I love is how this game perfectly reflects the taste of the player. If you want to be the most pure and noble paladin that the world has ever seen and help everybody that you come across, well, then the game will reward you for that, and it'll adapt. Then you'll meet people deeper down the road that will respond to your earlier actions. Or if you just want to be the most sadistic, kinky, depraved motherfucker imaginable, it will adapt to that as well. And I've played a million RPGs where they create the illusion of choice, where you basically have dialogue options that make you sound either nice or mean, but the story more or less stays the same. This game, your decisions have stakes, they matter, and you can... It's not just like one kind of bad guy that you can choose to be. You can be deceptive and have like plots and schemes and that sort of thing. Or you can be just like a rampaging barbarian or a total sadist. But what's fascinating to me is that no matter how many strange decisions you make, you can't break the game. You're creating a new narrative. It's a different narrative, meaning that every time you play the game, it's going to be a completely different experience. I mean, the best example I can think of, without giving away any major spoiler from the plot, there's a character named Lizelle who's basically like the poster child for the game. She was featured in all the early cinematics. The game opens with her. She's the first person to join your party. She is one of the main companions that you can have in this game. Well, as soon as my party got beyond the early access stage and I started making my own decisions and exploring the game, even though I didn't realize I was doing this, I accidentally created a situation where, due to her background and her allies and that sort of thing, she turned against me, tried to kill me, and I had to kill her. I was like, wait a second. I thought she was like the unofficial star of the game apart from the player, and now I've got like 2/3 of the game left to go, and she's not going to be part of the story. And for a second I panicked. I was like, did I fuck up? Did I break the game? I was like, no, you didn't break the game. This is just the story that you are telling with the game this playthrough. And the next time you play through it, the higher difficulty setting, you'll make different decisions and you'll use her to better advantage. You'll do better justice to that character. But that's what I love, is how there's no safety net in terms of what story you're telling. The game truly treats the player like a collaborator in a story where you're telling the story together. And that's such a unique, engaging experience compared to the passive experience of watching a show, watching a movie. And I love shows and I love movies. My first and only love in this world is cinema. But I get why there's some people who only play PC games and don't give a damn about movies. And when the story is dynamic and rich and rewarding and satisfying as this one, it's only a matter of time before more shows and more movies just start to borrow from and lean heavily upon games like Baldur's Gate 3. And Baldur's Gate 3 is technically a very old IP. Baldur's Gate 1 came out in the late 90s. Baldur's Gate 2 was either late 90s or early 2000s. But anyway, those are some of the best PC games ever. At that time, they were the best adaptation of Dungeons & Dragons we had ever seen. And if you look over my shoulder, see a bunch of first and second edition Dungeons & Dragons books. I've been part of D&D since like the early 80s when that cartoon first came out. My brother sucked me in. I know D&D backwards and forwards, and I can say with confidence, Baldur's Gate 3 is the best version of D&D we've ever seen. Like, I love animation, I love live action, I love all these different formats. Nothing comes close to Baldur's Gate 3. It is just fucking awe-inspiring. It's as rich and complex as like a great fantasy novel. And what makes the game particularly satisfying is that we're going through a very strange phase right now where the fantasy genre has a lot of TV adaptations, and almost all of them are horrendous. Like, I love fantasy books, and I love seeing so many authors getting their books adapted into shows, but the reality is The Witcher is awful. Lord of the Rings of Power is awful. The Wheel of Time is awful. The one exception is House of the Dragon, based on Fire and Blood, which is also over my shoulder. I love the fantasy genre. I could consume the fantasy genre day and night the rest of my life and feel very satisfied. But it is unsatisfying when you see so many writers and so many filmmakers getting the fantasy genre, I won't say wrong, just failing to execute. Like, there's no wrong version of fantasy. Fantasy can be anything. It's in the name. It's a fantasy. But the fantasy genre, we've got so many great examples where it's absolutely thriving. And I feel like Baldur's Gate 3 makes all these shows, apart from House of the Dragon, seem so painfully irrelevant and incompetent and ham-fisted and just boring and generic. Baldur's Gate 3 is alive. It is electric. It is like, it's open to so many incredible possibilities. And every minute that I spend not playing the game feels like a minute wasted, even talking about how much I love it in a video like this. And what's unique to this is that I've gotten over the hump of like freezing up and wondering what's the best thing to do in a game. A lot of times if you're playing an RPG like Fallout 4 or Elder Scrolls V Skyrim or whatever the case might be, you're like, shit, like how do I maximize my storytelling choices to get the best gear, the best cutscenes, the best etc. And with this, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to let this saga be whatever it is, and the next time through, it'll be a completely different saga. And there are many, many times where you have decisions where there are two kind of rival storylines going at the same time, and you want to pursue both, but it's impossible, where they're in direct conflict. Like right now, I've got a very important decision to make about an NPC where I have one quest line to kill her, which is part of my origin story, because I'm doing the, I think it's called like the Dark Hunger storyline or the origin story for my character. And then I've got another major storyline where I need to use her to push the story forward and save a bunch of people. And it's like, well, I can't do both, but I'm going to, I mean, obviously with multiple saves, I'm going to try and take both storylines as far as I can before I have to make a major decision. But I love like chewing my nails and having like real stakes and consequences to my decisions. And you might be wondering rightly at this point, who is responsible for a game as fascinating as this one? Larian Studios. They're a Belgian video game developer and publisher. They were founded in 1996 by Sven Vink, if I'm saying his name correctly. This guy is my fucking hero. You can tell like from his interviews and the way he walks around the studio in armor, like he's the world's biggest D&D nerd, and he previously made a name for himself with Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2, which were very popular, but not nearly on the level of Baldur's Gate 3. But what I like about his approach to the game, he very clearly is making the game that he wants to play, and everybody else is invited to go along for the ride. And I always love storytellers like that, like an author who writes the book that they want to read, and everybody else is invited, but in the end, they're the audience. Or a filmmaker, like Quentin Tarantino has spoken many times about how he makes movies that he wants to see. Everybody else is invited, but first and foremost, he is the audience that he is trying to satisfy. And I feel like Sven is doing the same thing here, and goddamn, he's being rewarded for his instincts and his tastes and his preferences. And clearly, a lot of people see gaming the same way that he does. I mean, if you have 800,000 people doing something at the same time, paying like $75 for the privilege, that is a fucking cultural phenomenon. And I think it's only a matter of time before Larian Studios is mentioned in the same breath as like From Software, or like the reverence that like BioWare and Bethesda were referred to back in the early 2000s. Larian Studios has arrived, and the whole gaming industry is going to change as a result. And much like with From Software, this is a game that's completely pure in its intentions, and there are no distractions. I was playing Diablo 4 recently, and it drove me fucking crazy just how many times they try to like squeeze you for additional money. I was like, you know what, fuck you. I just spent like $100 on this game. Stop trying to squeeze me for in-game purchases. I feel like in-game purchases are a blight upon humanity. They're a complete and total distraction. I know the corporate overlords of a lot of these developers insist upon it because they're trying to maximize the profits. But I feel like another way to maximize profits is to just make a really good game. Like Elden Ring was the best game of 2023. And there was none of that in-game squeezing, none of that bullshit. And Larian Studios, holy shit. They're justifiably earning the love and loyalty and adoration of hundreds of thousands of gamers, and it wouldn't surprise me if that number's in the millions by this time next year. And what's incredible to me is how fresh and unique and new and original this story feels and these characters feel. Like Forgotten Realms has been around for a long time. In the 1980s, like all those classic Keith Parkinson paintings, I was like, God damn, Forgotten Realms is cool. And I started reading the books, and I started playing some of the games. I mean, some of the earliest D&D, like PC games or Mac games, were set in the Forgotten Realms. And over the years, like I would say I like the Forgotten Realms, but I'm obsessed with like Dark Sun and Ravenloft and some of the other fictional settings. But Baldur's Gate 3, because of the, I guess, the personality of the original characters they've created specifically for this game, it feels like its own creation, even though, this is a very, very mild spoiler, but as you're walking along, you will bump into very famous characters from the Forgotten Realms setting. There's one character, I won't say who, but who's so powerful and so famous, and he's been around for so long. I bumped into him just kind of wandering around in nature. I was like, oh, I know exactly who this is. Ordinarily, I probably would have tried to like pick his pocket or push him around or kill him or whatever, but I was like, no, this is an NPC that I want to befriend because he's going to be very influential moving forward. but you don't have to know a goddamn thing about Forgotten Realms to enjoy this game. It might even make you enjoy it more because this whole landscape is going to feel so exciting if you're experiencing the Forgotten Realms for the first time. And as you're playing this game, you get an idea of what it must be like to be a player sitting at the table at a tabletop RPG session run by Sven. And I mean, once again, I said before, like it was like a DJ taking requests. He includes so many ingredients that I would want to include as a dungeon master in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, whether that's traveling to other planes of existence or interacting with gods and demons, where you can either do jobs for them or talk shit with them or have rivalries with them and that sort of thing. And once again, as I said before, you can make the game as inappropriate and savage as you like or not. Like, the options are there, and this game offers a rare situation where sometimes it's more depraved than even I need it to be. Like, usually if I see a show or a movie based on a book that I love, I'm like, all right, well, of course they're going to defang it, they're going to declaw it, they're going to tap the brakes. Every opportunity to explore the inappropriate content, a show or movie will shy away from it and just make it an overall more bland, unsatisfying experience. With this game, there have been a few situations where I'm like, God damn, like, what is wrong with you people? Like, this is so depraved and so disgusting. There's some stuff in here where the realm of like torture and S&M and like kinky sex thrills all kind of get interwoven, where as a player, like if you are curious on that front, it will reward you for your curiosity. Or if you're totally shocked and horrified, well, then you can just kill them and move on. But it's so rare where, like, as somebody who likes the dark side of fantasy, like books by R. Scott Bakker, like the end of his second book, The Warrior Prophet, was so dark. I was like, all right, that's as dark as fantasy can go. We've looked into the abyss, and now let's come back from the brink. But there have been a few moments in this game, probably because of the origin that it chose for my character, the so-called Dark Urge storyline, where something happened where I met an NPC who seemed so sweet and so innocent, and I invited them to stay at my camp, and I thought, oh, they're probably going to end up becoming a companion and joining my party. Like, yay, I found one of the new companions that wasn't available in early access. And once again, I'm not going to give anything away, but the next day, as I woke up in my camp, I started having all these flashbacks, and I got all these cutscenes and cinematics where my character had done some of the sickest, most fucked up shit imaginable. I was like, God damn, like, everybody just calm down. Like, what is going on here? It was one of those rare moments where I felt like a story had no safety net below, and I didn't really know where I was as a character or a player. I wasn't on firm footing, but it was just so delightfully unpredictable, and I just couldn't believe what I was experiencing. And that's a very rare, wonderful, beautiful thing, where you feel like you're in the hands of storytellers who are outfoxing you and outwitting you and giving you surprises, and they're willing to go places that perhaps you're uncomfortable with. It's unique in the world of media and entertainment. Now, for the rest of this video, I'm going to talk about some stuff that might be described as like mild spoilers. So if you've not played the game at all, this is the point where you want to bail out. But I do want to go into some detail about some of the things that I've enjoyed from this game. Then obviously, once I've completely finished it, I'm probably going to come back with like my final review. But overall impressions. If you played the early access version and you played it to death and you feel like, all right, what does this game have to offer that I don't already know? I'll say this: even the early content feels fresh and new again. So much has been modified and cleaned up, and you can tell that Larian every step of the way was taking player feedback and modifying the game. And I feel like this is something that Hollywood studios should learn from, and where they could follow their example. Maybe if you're going to do a big, giant, expensive show like Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, maybe bring in some viewers and customers and let them read some scripts or see some early cuts of episodes and get some feedback and pivot accordingly, because Larian doesn't have the arrogance of saying, this is the story that we're telling, we're going to shove it down your throat and shut up and just take it, and if you complain about it, we're going to call you names. It seems like they really wanted the feedback and the input of people that are invested in the Baldur's Gate world, because so much about the early part of the game has been changed and modified, like zones of like slight modifications or new cinematics related to companions. Even the art for your companions and that sort of thing, it's all been slightly modified and cleaned up. And even if you've played the early access content to death and you're eager to get past it, I would recommend you explore every single inch of it, because you're going to need the levels and you're going to need the gear that early access content provides before moving forward. Like, every time I think I'm starting to get maybe a little overpowered or starting to get a little too easy, I'll bump into an encounter or a puzzle or an environment where I just get my ass kicked every which way imaginable. So grind the levels, farm the gear, And if you bump into a situation where you feel like you're getting your ass kicked way too easily, a slight rethink on your strategies might make all the difference. Also, so many of the NPCs that you meet early on in the game have major story implications later in the game, so you need to do the full interactions, get those stories unlocked. Like, it's very rewarding to do the full clear, explore every single inch of the game, but also take your time just to relish it and enjoy it. Like, get weird in your camp. Like, there's one time where there's this giant party happening at my campground, and everybody's drinking and acting inappropriately, and I just ended up taking all the gear off all my characters and just letting them run around naked for a while. And obviously, like, none of the characters are going to react to your being nude in game. They treat you like you're still fully armored, but there are all these like romantic subplots that you can explore with every member of the of your party. So like, no matter what your tastes and preferences might be from a sexual angle, this game will give you the freedom to explore that. And yeah, my relationship with the character Shadowheart has been very rewarding. And I've got a big, strong, muscular paladin that I'm playing for my first playthrough. And it's like basically like watching like softcore animated porn at times with some of the hidden sex scenes in the game. And also, there are hidden sex scenes in the game that are really hard to unlock. No pun intended. Like, if you want to know what I'm talking about, look up the Drow Minthara, where you have to make a very clear story decision early on in the game, like really go to the dark side as an evil, depraved character, and even then you might not unlock that storyline, but look it up on YouTube, you'll see what I'm talking about. But as far as like your race and your class and your party makeup is concerned, this game gives you a lot of flexibility. Once you choose your race of your character, that's kind of locked in, but you have the option to respec your character. Not only respec your character and like change your ability scores around and that sort of thing, what your skills are, you can completely change your class as well as the class of the NPCs. And I'm letting my companions keep their original class because I feel like there's certain storylines, like Shadowheart worships the goddess Shar, and I feel like that really wouldn't make as much sense if you were to change your class to like a ranger. I mean, it still would kind of make sense. You can still worship whatever god you like, but I'm letting Shadowheart remain a cleric. But I think on my next playthrough, I'm going to start messing around with some of those characters because a lot of the companions you don't meet until deep into the game. Like, I'm still waiting for the ranger and the druid to be fully unlocked and playable with my party, so I'm playing right now with an Oathbreaker Paladin, which is fucking badass and tanky as hell, really powerful and really useful fighting all the undead deep into the game. But I'm using Astarion as a rogue spec'd into Assassin because Astarion is by far the best written character in the game. He's fucking awesome. I'm using Gale, keeping him as a wizard, but I made him with the evocation focus so that my spells don't hurt my own party. And Lizelle, sadly, is no longer available as a companion because as I mentioned before, I ended up making certain story choices which turned her against the party and she came after me. But I'm saving Will and Karlach for my next playthrough. But anyways, I'm using more of like a classic makeup this time of wizard, cleric, thief, and paladin. I mean, I could have gone fighter, but I went paladin. And my next playthrough, I'm probably going to go like barbarian, ranger, druid, and warlock. But another thing that's really important to keep in mind is there are 5 different kinds of gameplay you need to have available to you through your party. You need to have somebody that's really good in conversations. You need to have somebody that's really good at interacting with the environment in terms of opening secret doors and like getting rid of traps and that sort of thing. You need to have a great support character, someone with like heals and buffs and that sort of thing. You need to have offensive magic. And you need to have somebody who's really fucking good at melee combat. And so you need to make sure that at least one of your characters can play 2 of those roles. Otherwise, there are going to be aspects of the game where you're going to feel like you're getting like a subpar experience because you just don't have the proper party makeup for those challenges. Which is why I went with a paladin for my main character, because I knew he could be the melee DPS, but I knew he could also handle all the dialogue interactions due to his high charisma. But another really interesting challenge is trying to figure out how to keep all the various companions happy, because a lot of the companions fucking hate each other. Like, they have subplots that are like diametrically opposed to each other, so much so like you'll wake up sometimes in your campground and they'll be fighting to the death, and you have to make a decision like, how do I keep everybody happy so that I can continue using them in my party? But if some of them don't make it to the end of the story, so be it. You can always hire a hireling and then respec them to have them fill certain roles if you get completely screwed and you lose your fighter or you lose your healer or whatever the case might be. But in the end, no matter how great a game looks, no matter how great the storytelling is, no matter how great the concept is, in the end, gameplay is everything. And this game has just fucking nailed the gameplay. The way that the battlefields are like 3D chess with interactive puzzles and a high level of difficulty It's so addictive. Just little things like having Gale cast Magic Missile. This wasn't as evident in the early access, but now the way Magic Missiles will kind of curve around a corner or curve up and over buildings and still hit people, it's just a delight to watch. I just want to keep casting Magic Missile over and over and over again because it's so fun to watch in action. And the challenge is legit. Like, I'm playing it on the medium setting right now just as I learn the game and like learn all the ins and outs, but I still have total party kills all the goddamn time. And I feel like if you're not having total party kills from time to time, the game just simply isn't challenging enough. And the best surprise for me is seeing how some zones that initially just feel like mentally exhausting or headache inducing or unnecessarily complicated suddenly become your favorite zones once you figure them out. Like, I had that experience during early access with Grimforge, where I felt like, God damn, like, this place is so difficult to navigate. There's so many traps and there's so many hidden pathways to go. It's like, it seems overly complex. But now that I've memorized Grimforge, it's my favorite zone in the game. And a similar thing happened as soon as I got beyond the early access and I started going through this mountain pass and looking for this kind of Githyanki hidden base. It's like, finding this hidden base is so unnecessarily complex and so unnecessarily challenging. However, once I found it and explored the story options in there and made a lot of bad decisions, suddenly it became my new favorite place in the game because I was like interacting with gods and like having crazy companion interactions. But I feel like any game that gets you over the hump where they're able to turn you from frustrated into a believer is doing something very special. At any rate, I think that's all I have to say right now about the game at this stage. I'm going to have more to say when I've completely, fully cleared the game, and I'm going to have a lot more to say about the role of gaming moving forward as a source of fuel and inspiration for film and television. I feel like film and television is about to get into a stage where they're going to be borrowing from games the way they used to borrow from novels or from plays. Like, if you look at Hollywood in the 1930s, they were adapting books and adapting plays all the goddamn time. Like, movies have gotten sloppy seconds routinely throughout its history. I just think they're going to be getting sloppy seconds from a different form of media moving forward. And I'm so much more excited about what the fall has in store for us when it comes to gaming than I am for movies. Like, obviously, like, Dune Part 2 might not even come out this fall due to the strike. However, we've got Blasphemous 2 coming out at the end of the month. We've got Armored Core 6 from Software coming out at the end of the month. We've got Starfield coming out next month. And then Cyberpunk 2077, the DLC Phantom Liberty is coming out at the end of September. And then we have Lords of the Fallen in October. Like, that's a ton of really, potentially really interesting games all coming out over the next 2 months. And I think all of them are possibly or potentially really interesting fuel for future film and TV adaptations. But in spite of my excitement, my cautionary note is, this is how industries collapse, by losing customers to the rivals or rival forms of media. Like, if film and television can't keep the fantasy nerds and the sci-fi nerds satisfied with cool shows and cool movies, they will slowly but surely drift over to the rival platform. Like, if you can't make a science fiction movie as interesting as Starfield, well, then you might lose those science fiction fans for good. Or if you can't deliver on a fantasy show and make it as satisfying as playing Baldur's Gate 3, well, people would just invest hundreds of hours into Baldur's Gate 3. And obviously, film and television, as I mentioned before, they're passive. It's a different media entirely. And so it has different criteria and has different emotional needs to satisfy. But I feel like film and television are facing an existential crisis this fall. As I mentioned before, I'm much more excited about the world of gaming has to offer this fall than the world of film and television. And I look forward to reviewing all the above-mentioned games in due time. But at this point, I need to wrap up this video. Thank you so much for sticking with me all this time. If you're already playing Baldur's Gate 3, if you're already part of the Converted, I hope you enjoyed my perspective, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts below. And if you haven't played a computer game in a long time, who knows, maybe I've convinced a few people to dust off their PC and take Baldur's Gate 3 for a test drive. You will not regret it. But thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider hitting that notification bell to be notified about future content. And if you want to talk more, hunt me down on Twitter @GeekinUp. But thanks again for watching. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.